Hello, I'm Marilla Sargent, Vice President and Branch Manager of the Montlake Terrace office of Home Street Bank. Home Street Bank is proud to sponsor these videos, which will help the voters make an informed choice in the November elections.
Welcome to Vote 2017. I'm your host, Teresa Whipple, and today we are speaking with Bruce Ferris, who is the incumbent Port Commissioner for District Number 3. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the issues facing the port, but first I'd like to ask just a little bit about you and how long you've lived in the area and how long you've been on the Port Commission.
I was born in the state of Washington, although on the other side of it. My wife and I moved back to the Puget Sound area in 1972, and I've lived around Edmonds and in Edmonds ever since. And I've served on the Port Commission for a really long time, like 18 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, a long time.
All right, very good. Well, then you should have some really good answers to
I
these
got
questions.
I got good answers.
All right, very good. Well,
I know way too much about this subject.
Okay, well, let's talk about just in terms of the port itself. What do you see as the port's most important mission or goal?
Ports in the state of Washington have a relatively narrow mission. Their mission is economic vitality for the vicinity, for the port district that invented them, that voted them in. Ports are restricted to economic development, economic vitality for that district in the context of that district, and that includes transportation infrastructure.
Okay.
So our job is a little bit narrow, like a fire district, as opposed to a municipality. Our job in Edmonds initially was the marina. The Port of Edmonds was put in place to create and to run the marina that exists down here, which I think we've done a really good job at. Since then, the port has encompassed more of that mission, including not only just running the marina, but worrying about the economic vitality of the community.
Right, and when you talk about economic vitality, I know one thing that I've been familiar with in past port meetings that I've been to and reports that I hear is that, you know, the port is doing very well financially, fiscally, they're stable, correct?
Stable is one of those words that's kind of neutral.
Yeah.
We're doing really well.
Okay,
The port, in terms of right now, in terms of the near term, is doing very well. We're making money. We're making more money every year than we did the year before, as per our program. We have developed uniquely in the state a 30-year projection in terms of what is going to be necessary for income and outgo over the next 30 to 40 years as the roofs and docks require replacement, and we have a plan to get us there. Most ports in the state do not have anything like that. So we've worked really hard at strategically trying to ensure that the people who built the place in the first place don't have to pay for it the second time around.
okay. And when you look at kind of the short and long-term needs and challenges, I'm sure there must be some. What do you see maybe the top couple of things that you might be worried about as a commissioner?
You know, it's interesting because in virtually all dimensions, the port is doing really well.
Yeah,
But it's hard to stay there. You have to stay on your game, as it were. We have to continue to be financially prudent. We purchased and refinanced Harbor Square. That'll be paid off in a couple of years. We continually find that there are capital improvements and replacements that are necessary that we have to deal with, because one of our strategies is to optimize our maintenance, is to do the best we can to make the facility last as long as we can make it last, so that when it comes time to replace it, we will replace it a section at a time, as opposed to all coming due at once like it did when the roofs came down. So that challenge financially we're on top of, but we have to stay on top of it. We can't be distracted by opportunities that won't in fact prove to be financially beneficial for the owners, the people on the hill. We have to be very prudent with regard to what we invest in, be sure that it in fact is a going operation, that it'll have a return for the owners. And we can't behave like a municipality, we have to behave like the business that we are.
okay. And you mentioned Harbor Square, and of course, the business complex there that has a lot of the buildings that I think most of us are familiar with, whether we work out at the athletic club or just happen
Sure.
to drive by. Now, those are relatively old buildings, and do you have a vision? Does the port have a vision for what that might be in 5, 10, 15 years?
The port has a vision which is well fleshed out and on paper and in place, called the master plan. Under state law, it's called the scheme of harbor improvements, although there's not a harbor anywhere near the Harbor Square.
Right.
We're required to have one. We presented that as a change, as a modification of the comp plan some 5 years ago, and the city council rejected it.
Right.
They're the land use authority. They get to vote in the final analysis, and they voted not to include what we saw as the highest and best possible use for that chunk of land in our community in the comp plan. And so we're doing our best to run Harbor Square the way it is. It turns out that Harbor Square is tilt-up concrete buildings. They can be made to last a really long time. It turns out that the revenue, okay, the mortgage at Harbor Square will be paid off in 2020. The revenue that derives from Harbor Square is part of the revenue that's going to be necessary in order that the residents of the Port District not pay to build the marina again. So all of that plays together. To go back a little bit, the highest and best use idea is a subjective sort of a thing. Originally, Harbor Square was zoned by the city as being light industrial and commercial, and we kind of tried that. We've tried it since 1985.
So that's
And-
like some of the businesses that are in there now
Yeah,
in terms of like light
right.
manufacturing, that kind
And
of thing.
and the height limits, which are kind of the third rail of Edmonds politics.
Yes.
The height limits are 35 feet per contract rezone. The idea was to have an urban community at Harbor Square, and that's what the idea that the port has put in place and tried to get in the comp plan. That's what that basically says. And the city, who has land use authority, said that wasn't a good idea.
Right.
And I completely believe that they believe that that's the right thing to do. So we will operate Harbor Square within the constraints of the land use authority, and we'll do our best to run it and have it be profitable and the best it can be for the community under the present zoning.
Okay, and it's certainly we would have to talk about the politics of Harbor Square, the Edmonds Marsh, the city council decisions, as you mentioned. I think some people might say they've sensed, and I've sensed it when I've been at city council meetings, there's a certain amount of tension that when, the port and the city folks interact in certain ways. And do you think that's accurate, I guess would be my
I
question.
think it's an understatement. but
Okay,
yeah.
understatement, very good. And what do you see as a port commissioner, ways to maybe mitigate that? Do you think there's some trust issues between the two that need to be resolved, or what do you think should happen to fix that?
I think there are several issues, some of which are kind of transitory and some of which are kind of real.
Okay.
It turns out the nature of the beast is that the port is a business, and the commissioners at the port that are successful, that contribute the most, kind of have a business sort of background, and they're not very good politicians. The people who are successful at community leadership at the city council are over to the other side a little bit, not clear in the boondocks, but aside from that a little bit, they're more nearly politicians. They will more nearly talk to issues that may be their issue but aren't real issues. One politician was talking about there was a move afoot to pave over the marsh. Well, I've never even heard that from anybody that's responsible at all. The port has worked diligently to conserve the marsh and to improve the marsh. And given the opportunity, I'd like to talk about that some more. But there's a natural tension, because what the port sees long-term as the best interest of the people who live in the Port District may not be what the shorter-term vision is of the city council.
Okay, yeah, that does seem like a challenge to overcome.
It is a challenge,
Yeah.
but that's why they pay me $200 a month.
Okay. Good to know. Well, so in following up on that just a little bit, yes, I know the port did have a very significant role in cleaning up the Edmonds Marsh initially, and I think that would be good to talk about, and also maybe talk a little bit about, there's some work happening right now at the old Unical property where there's some cleanup going on. What do you see as the port's role in kind of preserving and protecting the marsh? Because I think there are some, if you go to a city council meeting, you are led to believe that the port is not interested in doing those things, that somehow whatever you're interested in is just pro-development and anti-environment, and I would guess that you would probably disagree with that.
I would probably disagree with that.
Okay.
Because it's wrong. That's the reason I would disagree with it. The Department of Ecology report submitted to the Edmonds City Council last spring stated unequivocally that the biggest threat to the marsh is stormwater runoff. The period, next chapter, some years ago, the port purchased the Harbor Square property from the I think it was Chevron Oil who filled it originally, and this was in I think the late 70s, and they kind of filled it with anything that would move. We subsequently found I guess around 2007 or 2008, we subsequently found that there was petroleum products that were migrating around in Harbor Square, but not making it into the marsh, and we monitored where that water flow was, where that groundwater was flowing. But we did find on one occasion that there was petroleum products intruding into a storm drain that was actually emptying into the marsh. We went through the actual cost of the cleanup was $1.6 million. If you load it with all of the attorney's fees and overhead and all, it's $3 million.
And the port paid for that?
And the port paid for that and wasn't forced to.
Okay.
We did it because it was the right thing to do. So stormwater runoff and petroleum product intrusion into the marsh is a big deal. And the port, I believe, has been more than responsible in terms of ensuring that the health of the marsh stays good and improves. Those who choose to say otherwise are either not aware of all the facts or are choosing their issues in such a way as it takes their point of view forward. I can talk to that. I can't talk to what their motivation is. I can only talk to what we did and why we did it and why we believe it was the right thing to do.
Okay, that's fair. And I guess I would say, is maybe it's that balance. The port obviously is legally required to do certain things, and as you say, the business aspect of it is a part of that. And perhaps when you're in a more of a city council environment, you are feeling like you need to be, not saying port commissioners aren't responsible to voters, but you have another responsibility, right, that maybe the council does not have. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Well, it isn't responsibility so much as constraints.
Constraints, correct. Thank you for correcting me on that.
We're constrained to operate along certain lines and to worry about certain
Yes.
charter elements. Whereas the city, the municipality, is pretty much takes care of everything from long-term planning
Yeah.
to filling the potholes.
Right.
And they have to worry about all of
Yeah.
that. In addition to which, for whatever reason, and we could spend a lot of time talking about why, their meetings are more popular, they're more attended, the city council people tend to be more responsive to whoever's in front of them talking, as opposed to perhaps, in my opinion, thinking about what the long-term future of all of the members of the community ought to be. Well, that's my point of view. But they're responsible in the way that they choose to be. And we have to be responsible for the economic well-being and the environmental integrity of what we're in charge of.
Sure. Okay, that makes complete sense. One thing that I think that we've heard quite a bit about lately is the port's role in tourism. You have the whale watching boats there now, and what other things what other roles do you see the port playing in increasing tourism?
Tourism is almost a freebie, because the more people we can get to come to our community, the healthy our business climate will be, the better our economic vitality will be. So tourism is a big deal for the port in terms of economic vitality of our community. The whale watching enterprise has proven to be successful beyond our, well, not wildest imagination, but our guesses anyway. We had 11,000 people who watched the whales from the Chilkat the first year. We had 15,000 the second year, and next year we're going to have 2 boats on. It's proven to be very popular. This year, it is so popular, as a matter of fact, that the city of Seattle, the Port of Seattle, excuse me, gave us a grant to basically run advertisements in areas outside the region here, in Utah and Colorado, wherever, to attract people to come to Seattle and Seattle environs, specifically Edmonds, and watch the whales and visit our community, and incidentally visit us, leave their money, and go home, which is the real charm that tourism has for our community. It doesn't require a great capital investment. It just requires continued effort and continued work. It's been a focus of ports across the state, and specifically the Port of Edmonds, for several years in terms of economic vitality, economic development. Our executive director, Bob McChesney, is the president of the South Snohomish County Tourism Bureau this year. He's worked our tourism efforts from that end and through that organization. So we think we're doing an awful lot to promote tourism. We have the Destination Port of Edmonds program, which we've had in place for 7 or 8 years, whereby visitors to the port in boats, people who come in by boat and spend a night or spend a week, are given a coupon book to go uptown and visit restaurants and visit stores, and are encouraged to, once again, drop their money and go back down to the marina and get in their boat and go home.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing for our local economy.
Right, yeah, and I think sometimes people forget about that those folks who do end up in staying at the marina in a boat do go and
They
dine
do.
and do other things.
And forgetting about things is one of the charms that the port, for me, has in terms of a success indicator. You don't hear about the port very much. It kind of comes down to, you got a chunk of government that works. One of the reasons it works is not because of me. It is because of the commission and the staff. We're a cohesive group. We argue and kick and scream and fight over all kinds of issues. In the final analysis, we wrap it up, we figure out how to move forward in a consensus manner, and we get it done. It's government that works.
Yeah, and do you think, I've thought about this a little bit, just I've been to a few Port Commission meetings, and do you think that there are ways that perhaps the port could, or does it need to, better engage the community on educating them about what you do? And
Yeah, we do. We need to do a better job. We've almost broken our arm patting ourselves on the back all the way up to finding out that we weren't doing as good a job as we could. We're doing a better job now. We're putting out quarterly brochures indicating what the port is and what the port works on and why it's a success. So we're trying to work hard at communications. It turns out that you can always do more,
Yes,
but we have to feel that we're doing the best we can.
okay, all right, good. Well, we are getting to the point where it is your turn to talk directly to the voters and tell them why they should re-elect you to the commission. So go ahead.
My turn. It isn't so much that I need to be reelected to the commission as the port needs to continue to have experience and cohesiveness in the management team at the port. That includes the commission and the senior staff and all of the staff, working together, solving issues, coming up with the right answers. That was one of the strengths of going from 3 commissioners to 5 commissioners, which we did some years ago. It costs more to have 5 commissioners than it did 3, but we get a more thorough discussion. We get more points of view. We have more resources to spread around in terms of regional activities. So it's the cohesiveness of the staff and the lack of in the final analysis, at least, contentiousness on the staff that allows us to continue to do a good job. I would like to be reelected, and I would like your vote so that we can continue that excellence that exists at the port now.
Great. Well, thanks, Bruce, for coming in. I really appreciate it, and good luck in November.
Thank you for the opportunity. I want to tell people about this. We got a great port.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.